Human beings are each gifted with the capacity to be a learning, evolving, creative creature. And we don't seem to fully grasp yet that there's no reason to hold anybody back. There's no reason to say, well, that person can only do that, or this person can only do this. They can do whatever they can creatively generate in their own thinking. And so there's all these debates about, well, college is only for these people or those people and so forth. And I'm not saying that college is for everyone. Learning is for everyone. Adaptation is for everyone. If we can make our universities produce master learners more dedicated to the breadth of our society, more dedicated to the betterment of our society, more dedicated to the betterment of our democracy, if we can do that also, we will have had a major impact on the outcome of humanity. So our charter has emerged with three principal component parts to it. The first part is that we will be an institution deeply committed to inclusion and the success of our students as opposed to exclusion.
We have a mission and a commitment to providing an open, accessible education to the community in which we're embedded.
The more individuals that we leave on the fray, the higher likelihood they won't reach their potential, that they won't be able to have that one meaningful conversation that changes everything.
Things are changing so rapidly that when we graduate a student, much of what they know in terms of specifics is going to be obsolete in a matter of years.
We're trying to produce a person capable of learning anything. We call it an adaptive university as opposed to a rigid university. It's a very different objective.
The world, as it moves forward, we'll see more and more complex problems. And the only way we can deal with these problems and come up with solutions is if students think in these expansive terms.
If you're an engineer, it's very easy to work with policy people, with economists. If you're a social scientist, it's very easy to work with a physical scientist or an engineer. That's hard to do at a lot of universities. It's easy to do here. And it's important because a lot of the problems that the real world is facing us with need that kind of multidisciplinary approach.
There are people here that specialize in whatever it is you're interested in. It is definitely an advantage of having a larger university with a large faculty.
Our research activity will be measured by the impact that we have on the public good, not the academic good only, but the public good. Did we better the outcome of our community or not in a measurable way?
You'll be challenged here to really look beyond just a career and just some academic path that you're following, but to see that what does that mean for the greater good of the world.
When you do something well, you can take it out in the world and you can make it a better world. And if people know that, if people know that's what they can do, it's enormously empowering. It's enormously gratifying.
It's our job and our professional but also moral imperative to get the findings of our research into the hands of the everyday person that can actually use and consume and turn around this research for the betterment of their workplaces or their local focuses of control.
So if you leave ASU with this confidence that, yes, I know how to approach a problem, I know how to tackle it, and I know how to produce a good solution in a team, then that becomes a really powerful tool that you can use in any job that you may have.
Very few colleges or universities could even complete the debate about whether or not they should take responsibility for the broader community. We have completed that debate. We have launched that mission. We are underway relative to that element of our charter. So in 12 years, we have proven that we can do it, that the institution has been transformed to be able to carry out that very complex charter, and that the charter is now the reason for existence of the institution.
So what we're doing is we are training the next generation of leaders. These students are learning something specific about a topic that interests them, but they're also learning these critically important concepts that will shape the way that they approach the rest of their lives.
The culture of a major research-driven public university in the United States has been inextricably and forever altered to be focused on the success of the student and the success of the community, and that every asset of those individuals in the university, every ounce of energy that they have, is devoted to those two things, and that at that university, through years of demonstrated proof, the students being produced at that university, regardless of their family circumstance, are as capable or more capable than the students being produced at any university.
Again, thank you for coming this evening. My name is Rick Shanger. I'm the CEO of the ASU Foundation. And tonight we're going to have a conversation. We've been doing this for a number of years, and I think you'll all enjoy the conversation. I want to talk a little bit about the structure of the evening, but first I want to welcome some folks. There are a number of people in the audience that I think it's important to recognize. We have members of the governor's office in the audience. We have some state representatives in the office. We have some mayors and past mayors in the audience. We have representatives from state universities. These are all people that dedicate their time to our great state, and I thank them for all being here this evening. You know, I came to ASU 10 years ago, and I came here because I thought it was going to be a great place to make a difference. And I have to tell you, after being here for a decade, it is a fantastic place. I couldn't be more proud that as we talk tonight about the value of an education, that my youngest daughter started in ASU as a freshman this year. And I have to say that after 10 years of talking about everything we do at ASU and all the benefits of it, I now see it through the eyes of my daughter, and it's actually been really fantastic. Tonight, as we talk about the value of education, I always think that education, particularly the education I received, is immeasurable. But tonight you're going to have a surprise, in that you're going to be hearing from President Crow talk about the value of education in very specific ways, and actually begin talking about and measuring the value of education, which I think is so important to advance the public debate in this area. As President Crow goes through his presentation, I ask you to think about a couple things. First of all, everybody got a card on the back of their seat. If you have any questions that you would like to ask President Crow in our question and answer session, just pass them down to the end of the aisle. We have students that are going to be around and picking up the cards. And when I get back up on stage after President Crow's presentation, I'll be reading some of those questions, so please feel free to do that. If you're of another generation, you can also tweet your question. And the Twitter handle is @ASUPresOffice, @ASUPresOffice. And so if you'd like to tweet it, we are monitoring the Twitterverse, and we will take your question that way also. By the way, if we don't get to your question tonight, and you leave us your email or your Twitter handle, we'll get back to you with the answer over the next couple of weeks. We want to make sure that we answer questions that you may have, and if you're interested in response, make sure we have a way to connect back with you. I've known the guy who's going to come up here on the stage for almost 33 years. And so spending as much time as I have with him over the years, it's really quite an honor for me to work with him and have a chance to introduce the 16th president of Arizona State University, Dr. Michael Crow.
So, thank you, Rick. That told me not to stand that far forward, I think. That was an 8-track deal we had back there. So, we're not the richest university, so we got 8-track players back there. And the video was converted to 8-track, and it shut off, so they re-engineered it very quickly. So welcome. I'm going to try something, I don't know if it's going to work or not in this conversation, because we live in an interesting moment in American history. We've had many interesting moments in American history, but that's actually a question prominent in the national debate right now. And I think it's not the wrong question. I think it's not the right question. I understand the reason so many people are asking the question, because we're confused to some extent about time and space and all the things that are around us. And I don't have a definitive answer. I'm going to walk through the logic for everyone. But I am going to say that college, people think of it as a thing. They think of it as a place you send your child to. We don't have another word for it yet. As opposed to, how about that learning process that you begin at some point when you end high school and then it goes on for the rest of your life, which might include going away somewhere for a while, and then include being engaged in a constant lifelong educational process, a name for which we don't have. And so I want to walk through some logic, but I can't help but walk through logic without actually understanding and allowing the rest of us to understand that there's some history to the matter. There's some history to the matter. And I've used the slides I'm going to show next a couple times before because I do it because it's so profound. Profound. The Massachusetts Constitution of 1780 was one of the first documents written in the formation of the actual emergence of our democracy. So you remember the people in Massachusetts were the ones that said, "We've had enough, you're going to leave," to the British. They wrote this document 5 years after Lexington and Concord. They wrote this document while the city of New York was occupied by British troops. They wrote this document before our country, in its present form, had been established as a republic. We were a revolutionary state fighting to the bitter death against the King of England. Wisdom and knowledge, as well as virtue, diffused generally among the body of the people, being necessary for their preservation of their rights and liberties, and as these depend upon the spreading of opportunities and advantages of education in various parts of the country and among the different orders of the people, it shall be the duty of whom? Meaning, it's a different world today, but it was considered at the time a value related to the formation of the country itself. But it also says to cherish the interests of the literature, the arts, the humanities, the literature, and the sciences, and all seminaries. You didn't know you're at a seminary. All seminaries of them, especially that one. And that one, which is Harvard, was the first institution of higher education established in the United States. By the way, almost 150 years before this particular point. And in 1780, it remained the only college in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. There weren't two others for an additional 15 years. The point being, and John Adams is the author of these phrases, that John Adams, fantastic patriot, author, designer of many aspects of our republic, this is what he thought during the Revolution while being hunted by the British for execution. With many other things on his mind, this is what he thought about education. And in specifically what he thought about the seminaries, the colleges. That's what they were producers mostly then of ministers. This is what they thought. Now, I don't know what's happened to us between then and now, but a lot of water has passed under the bridge or over the dam, however you want to see it, and we have a somewhat different view. But I'm going to argue we don't really have a different view because we can actually look back at the outcomes of this model. Did this model and some of its assumptions actually work? We do have these varied perspectives. So genius Megan here from Bloomberg, you can see what she says. A sacrilegious question: is an investment in a college education really worth it? Is it worth it for the family? Is it worth it for the foundations? Is it worth it for the state? Is it worth it? That's basically what she's asking. She says she fears that it's not. She fears that it's not. Why?
you're going to be worse off. I don't know what college she went to. But I guarantee you she went to one. The next guy I actually know, smart guy, very successful, genius, unbelievably wealthy and successful, powerful guy, strong ideas. He pays kids not to go to college. And he says that spending 4 years in a lecture hall with a hangover will be revealed as an antiquated, debt-fueled luxury good. He might have had a bad day. He's a genius and a billionaire. Not everybody can be either a genius or a billionaire. Very few people are either. He's both. And this is what he thinks about college education. And then lastly, Menand at Harvard, interesting, knowledge as a form of capital that's unevenly distributed, as all forms of capital are unevenly distributed. And people that have greater access to it have some advantages over those that have less access to it. How many of you, just show of hands, believe that there's a different possible outcome if you have more or less access to knowledge capital? So most of you think that. So the American dream. So I was calculating last night when I was thinking about this. I was saying, so one of my ancestors, the first part of my father's family that came to the United States, came to Maryland about 1640. They were English. They came as indentured servants to an island in the Chesapeake Bay called Kent Island. And they lived in Maryland from roughly 1640 until the end of the American Revolution, when they won land grants for their service in the American Revolution for property in Bullitt County, Kentucky, where they moved in the late 1780s. So between 1640 and 1780, the people that arrived were illiterate, William Crowe and his fellow indentured servants. They didn't stay illiterate, but they didn't go to school. They learned to read, they learned to count. They learned to read the Bible, to go to church, to do everything else that everybody in those particular communities did at that particular time. But no one had ever been to a school by the time that part of my family moved to Kentucky in the 1780s. Now, they didn't stay in Kentucky very long. They only stayed there about 40 years before they moved to Missouri. So they continued that westward movement. I'm the first person in my family not to live in Maryland, Kentucky, or Missouri. Just to put that in perspective. I'm the first generation to have left Missouri. They arrived in Missouri in the 1820s with a land grant from President Jackson, which we still own. They'd never been to school. These were smart people because I know their offspring, my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, my great-grandmother. I know them. I knew them. No one went beyond high school until my father. No one attended college until me. Ever. They were smart. So I want to make one thing clear before we get into this, because I get tired, almost even sick of this. That somehow I think college is for smart people, or that smart people go to college, or that smart people go to college and stupid people don't. Not true. Not true. Of my relatives, the smartest that I knew was my mother's father. He never graduated from high school. He was born in 1908, joined the Marines when he was 17, and fought in Nicaragua against counterinsurgents fighting. I don't know. He asked me once when I was about 15, do you ever use drugs? I said, no. He says, I did. It's not worth it. He was the grandson of Irish immigrants who were brought again as railroad servants, basically, to build the railroads. He never graduated from high school. He served in the Marines. He served his country. He died after having risen to the rank of a position called vice president of a company called the Curtis Candy Company which made, because we ate them every Christmas and every year by the box, Butterfingers and Baby Ruths. He was unbelievably smart, unbelievably gifted. He never graduated from high school. So I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about smart. I'm talking about what it takes to be prepared. I'm talking about learning how to learn for the world that we live in now, not the world that, Ellis Arthur Renfro, my great-grandfather, born in West Plains, Missouri around 1880, what he needed to know, because it ain't 1880 anymore. The world is nothing like what those folks, in my family's case, that have lived here since 1640 have thought. And so I want to be clear before I go into this, because I don't want someone later to think somehow that I think everybody needs to go to college. I don't. I think enough people need to go to college to help our society to be adaptive. I think enough people need to go to college to help us to be able to be capable of doing what lies ahead. Somewhere along the line, someone in my lineage went to school. They actually went to school. I don't know when that was. I estimate it was somewhere after 1900. So, don't get me wrong. Plenty of smart people, nothing to do with education per se. American dream. That wasn't my family, but it might have been yours. We arrived from everywhere. And everybody came for the same reason. The people on my father's side, William Crowe and his family coming, just in the 1640s, they show up as indentured servants, thinking that it's going to be better than whatever they were trying to live through. At the time was the Civil War in England. And it had to be better than that. So we all showed up this way, no matter how we got here. We all came, and there was a dream, and there's a simplistic version of the dream. That. Married couple, 2 kids, middle class, white family, looking at a house and a car. Well, you can change the nature of the couple. You can change the nature of the ethnicity of the person. The dream remains the same, to have a place and to do what you want, to be free, to be unconstrained. The American dream. And that dream looks a lot different now. Look at these faces, these kids, all ASU graduates, coming from everywhere, advancing from everywhere, dreaming. It's not the only way to realize your dreams. It's a way. And so why is it so maligned? It turns out that educational attainment is the single most predictive variable of social mobility in the United States since 1900. Why did they not measure it before 1900? There was no educational attainment. And our culture thrived without that. Very few people were educated. Almost no one went to college. I might note that John Adams went to college. I might note that Thomas Jefferson went to college. James Madison went to college. Alexander Hamilton went to college. Ben Franklin did not. When you have an IQ of 200, you don't necessarily need to. And George Washington wanted to join the British Army when he was 21, and I think they made him a lieutenant colonel, and he went off to fight in the French and Indian War and almost died with General Braddock. Got out of there with 8 bullet holes to his clothing and kept moving. The key to social mobility in the last 100 years has been that. A little evidence of that. On the left, your adult income for individuals raised in families in the lowest income quintile. 20%, 20th percentile, right? So if you're raised in the lowest 20% family and you don't have a college degree, your outcome is on the left. 45% of you stay in the bottom. If you're raised with a college degree, but you came from that family background, you can see a very different circumstance. That's called social mobility. One variable, educational attainment. So again, it's like, college? I don't know. Might not really be worth it. Seems to have been worth it for the last 100 years or so. Now, this is a little bit complicated stuff. So let's say we took jobs and we put them into 3 categories. On the left, non-routine cognitive skills. Most of you have non-routine cognitive skills. Most of you have non-routine cognitive-oriented jobs. Employment trend, just look at the slope of the line. Employment trend, up. Middle box, non-routine manual. You're an artist, you're a builder, you're a designer, you're a chef, you're a cook. You're doing something that can't be replaced by a machine. It's non-routine, but it involves your body and your energy. No problem. Routine skills, bad situation. You've been replaced. That's a third. These are basically thirds of the economy. So, back to college. Is college worth it? Value to the individual. So we talk about rates of return. I could call on one of our business leaders here to give me the calculation of rates of return, but just basically it's the same formal. You put in X, you get back Y over time. What's the rate of return? The rate of return continues to substantially exceed the rate of investment for college. I don't care what you hear in whatever media journal is talking about non-returns or tens of thousands of unemployed graduates from this place or that place. They don't actually have the data, apparently. It's about 15%. Somebody want to take a guess at the stock market since 1950? A third of that. So people say, well, what about what you study? Does it make a difference? Yeah, it does make a difference in terms of your rate of return. Turns out some people, like being trained to be teachers in education, they already know before they do that their rate of return will be less. They don't care. They still want to be a teacher. Their rate of return in their field, 9%. In engineering, in your field, 21%. But there's this literature out there about all the people not employed or underemployed, or they're working at this place or that place. That's the column on the right. So this notion of somehow that to the individual making the investment in their education, and I'm a big believer in individuals making investments in their education, the rate of return is substantial, and in certain areas growing, all better than the stock market, all worth the investment, all even worth, if necessary, working while you're in college, borrowing money to go to college, because the return is so significant. As I said, underemployed. We hear all these stories. Well, you went to college, but you're working at Starbucks. Well, we're dealing with Starbucks on a lot of different things. A lot of kids don't finish college. Some finish college. You turn out, you talk to them, it says, well, I'm an artist. And I'm working on my art, and this is my job. And I don't know how long it's going to take me to get it right. Or I'm an actor or a musician. Or this is what I want to do because I spend the rest of the time taking care of someone else. Or whatever. It's this and this and this and this. And so there's this notion of what is the rate of return for people that are quote-unquote underemployed. It still exceeds most other things that you would invest in. That's just the return to the individual. This is mean earnings by age, by level of education. So look at the bottom line in the white, high school. So some people say to me, in fact, I'll even point at someone in the room that told me this once, that it kind of looks like when you're 25, everybody's close together. And so the difference between a high school degree and some college, an associate's degree and a bachelor's degree at age 25 is almost nothing. But what happens over time? The kid with only the high school degree or less than a high school degree, it's pretty flat. Everybody else, it looks to me like there's a substantial uptick over time. And it turns out, isn't it funny? I didn't design the chart, the data, the outcome, the logic, the nomenclature. I didn't design anything. You tell me why it is that each of these income levels are exactly derivative of the educational attainment level. What does it mean? Now, I'm not 61 yet, but looks like I'm in for an uptick right there. So, key point. People who learn to learn continue to earn over their lifetime. Now remember, I'm not saying that the valuation of the value of a college degree should be the return to the individual. I'm just starting there because that's all the people in Money Magazine and Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and others, that's all they want to write about. Now, I'm not exactly sure why they didn't spend much time actually looking at the data. They took anecdotes, individuals, and they tell stories about them. I can tell you a story about anybody, anything you want. What do you want? I can give you one of those stories. This isn't about that. Those who do not see their wages remain flat as they age are those that are educated. Now, just again, a show of hands, in general, not remembering your cousin Willie or your sister Alice who screwed up big time and, generally, people think this is logical. How many think this is logical? All right. Not everybody, but most. Now, what about between generations? So I was born in 1955. That makes me a mid-range baby boomer, 44 to 64. You know about all the generations coming up from there was the silent generation, the generation before me. There was and then the last one, the millennials, and then a new one that we created here at ASU called the millennial nets. Those are the people born after the internet was ubiquitous, 1994, 1995. We call them millennial nets. I think they're a different species. So by generation. So I want to make sure you see how this works. So this is median annual earnings of full-time workers between the ages of 25 and 32. So the white line are people silent generation, early bloomers, late bloomers, Gen Xers, and millennials. Wages are going down if you have only a high school education between generations. Intergenerational decline for high school. 2-year or some college, same thing, higher wages relatively, but still decline as time moves forward. So what worked out pretty well between the silents and the early bloomers, uptick, now is a downtick, almost collapsing on top of each other. Again, I didn't design the system. I'm merely reporting to you the realities of the facts. At the top, the red line, which you can barely see, is bachelor's degree or more. Between generations, it's upwardly sloped. Now, there's all kinds of artifacts and reasons and logic and all kinds of things about that. It nonetheless is a fact. Now, that's the value to the individual. High rate of return, all degrees, varies between the degrees. Doesn't make any difference, however, if your degree is in English or your degree is in philosophy or your degree is in math or engineering. There's some difference, but you still have a rate of return which is quite substantial to the individual. Increasingly so as time advances. What is that a function of? Well, back to the story about my relatives. It isn't the same world. The world has shifted. The world has changed, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So value to society. So I don't know if this counts as value to society, but how many of you are happy that you have to pay other people's unemployment salary? A couple, all mostly egghead academics. Whatever it takes. But generally, none of us are too happy that I'm going to give you my money so that you can, do something else with it than I might do with it. But so what is the value to society of a college education? So this is December 2007. Call that the recession underway. The collapse of the banks and other financial institutions was right in there, October 2008, right there. And this, just to take that point, they're all starting at zero. This is the change in employment since the start of the recession by educational attainment. So if you have less than a high school diploma, there are 14.1% fewer jobs in existence in the American economy today than there were that day. Process that. If you have some school, that's high school, only, high school diploma, no college, 9% fewer jobs. Total in the entire economy. That's if you have some college. That's if you have college. Again, don't shoot the messenger. It is definitive that there is a different economic outcome at the moment in the way the economy is operating at the moment, which could lead to differential social outcomes, differential social welfare outcomes, differential social outcomes, differential state expenditure outcomes, derivative of educational attainment. Going all the way back to Adams. I'm not saying he was enough of a genius to see it all, but he understood some things. This is unemployment rates among individuals ages 25 and older. Obviously, there's always been this trend. This up here is less than a high school diploma, goes down, 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 goes back up to 14%, coming back down as the recession ends. That bottom line is a bachelor's degree. Now tell me when those lines weren't in their same order. This has been going on for a long time. Now, we're all worried about systemic unemployment. We're worried about demand on social services. We're worried about all kinds of things. And I think that we're, wishing, praying that all these things are going to get better. And maybe they will, but I'm going to show you some data here. Oh, by the way, didn't occur. There's no recovery from the Great Recession. Now again, take the word college off. Take it off. We don't have a word to describe it. Describe it as there's no recovery from the recession for people that stopped getting themselves educated in some kind of way, in some kind of recognizable way. It doesn't mean they weren't being educated. Sometimes you're being educated and no one else will recognize it. You really know how to do a lot and you don't have a certificate or a badge or some way to carry forward that. But just think about that. No recovery. And we're going to come, by the way, how's Arizona doing on that educational attainment thing? Not as well as we need to, so we'll talk about that. Employment has fallen, as I mentioned. So let's just say ASU. So we've been sitting over here as the Tempe Normal School cranking out graduates. And they're going into the Arizona economy. And you'll hear some people say, well, they all moved away, or they're all hippies. They just, grow dope and smoke dope, and there's, whatever. And I'm like, really? Maybe 4 of them. 207,000 ASU graduates worked in Arizona in 2012. That, by the way, is 27% of all college graduates living and working in Arizona. That is a huge number. We're proud that this institution can make that kind of contribution to Arizona. Here's how much they made, and this is from actual data. $11.4 billion. Whoops, they paid some taxes. $819 million in taxes those graduates paid. Oh, by the way, their wages, on average, are 35% to 50% in their early years higher, and 50% to 100% higher after age 35. So they're paying more taxes than anyone else. In fact, they're carrying a huge burden of the tax requirement. Now let's just say that we helped up the number of college graduates. We would raise the state's gross state product, think of it as the gross domestic product, by 3.5% just by producing that many more graduates, just by doing that thing only. Now, you might say I'm oversimplifying. Well, I am oversimplifying except for the data, because some people don't stay in Arizona, some people move away, some people don't get a job, some people stay in their mother's basement, some people, go off, they do this, they do that, they don't contribute, but it turns out that most do. It turns out that most do. And that's the impact of just producing graduates. And then you say, I used this number the other day. So in 1950, the population of the United States was about half the size that it is now, roughly half, a little bit less than that. The economy, however, has grown from 2 trillion to 16 trillion, an 8-fold increase for only a doubling of the population. How do you increase? This never happened in human history. Human history for thousands of years, you can look at all economic histories, Population and economy, there was no growth. It was just the flattest line imaginable. Now you get population growth in the United States of 2x, and you get economic growth of 8x. Why does that happen? More people knowing how to do more things, exchanging goods and services between each other because they're doing more things, working, doing more things. It's a whole building of the way the economy works. We're adding a lot. I won't stay on that. So, on the social side, I'm going to fly through these. College graduates are more likely to have access and participate in employer-provided pension plans. So, have there been any debates about defined benefit pension plans? Yeah. Turns out people go to college, generally put their money into different kinds of plans. They have health care. They exercise a little bit more. They have a more, this is all based on data. These are not speculations. This is based on national data and Arizona data. Lots of differences. They participate in volunteer activities. They demonstrate a greater understanding of political issues. They're less likely to smoke, suffer from that. You get the gist. Oh, that's an interesting one. There's all kinds of famous people with college degrees that are in the slammer. And lots of other people that should be. But it's not very likely. We're spending more money on prisons than ever. It's a growth industry in the United States. A growth industry. So someone will come up to me and they'll say, really? Are you really so stupid as to think that if I just get people to go to college, they'll go to prison less? I'm like, yeah, I'm stupid enough to believe that. And the reason I believe it is that chart right there. Education attainment and public assistance. So red would be those folks that don't graduate from high school. So 43% of them are on Medicaid. 22% are taking school lunch money. 24% are taking advantage of that program. That by the green is, so there's some people, and there's some people here, and there's some people here, but not very many. That's not 2% of the total, that's 2% of the people that graduate from college. So what does that tell you in terms of social service expenditures? Would it or wouldn't it not be worthwhile to spend on educational outcomes if you wanted to lower your social service expenditures in the mid to long term? Well, this would say that that's a worthy task to undertake. The challenge. So, let me see if I went too far. The challenge. So what do you do about this? So again, forget that the notion of college is a place where you go away to college. Remember, it's this process where some will go away, some will continue their education, and so forth. So what we've seen and what the challenge is that this is a funny chart, but imagine that at the top, it basically says that we have about 80%, give or take, kids graduating from high school, and admittedly a lot of them are not as prepared as they should be, but nonetheless, about 80%. The argument is for the American economy to be successful, we need all of them. That's the 1.0 on the top right to graduate from high school. We have about 68% going to some kind of post-secondary education, but we have less than half of them graduating. And so the notion here is where we are in 2010 or 2011 versus where we would need to get to where the governor of Tennessee has articulated where we need to go. Governor Haslam. Republican governor of Tennessee. I was on a panel with him not too long ago in Washington, and he got up and he gave a brilliant presentation on how Tennessee was going to be more effective. He says, I got to get 100% through high school, if not at least 90. I've got to get half to some kind of post-secondary educational outcome. And then we'll be more competitive. And he has devoted immense amounts of time, energy, and resources to be able to do that. Now, here's a real problem we have, by the way, and that's this number right here. That's actually a high number. That's the 3-year graduation rate from a community college. And it's half that in this state. That's 29% for those of you, 29.9, so just half. So half of that is 15. So here's the scale of the problem. So that's the number of 17-year-olds, assuming relatively flat population growth, which isn't true, but it's a relatively flat group of 17-year-olds. And to get to 50% college attainment, that's what it would take. 50% some kind of post-secondary per year. So that's a couple million people per year going to that level of educational attainment. Let me tell you right away, we never thought about that. We never conceptualized it. We've only had kids going to school for 100 years. We never imagined that lots of people would go to something after a public school, a public high school. We never imagined it. We never planned for it. We never counted on it. We never built for it. So it's highly problematic. This is what we would need to do to get up to these higher levels. All I want you to see is the slope of the line, and that's what you need to do, and I'm showing you with the filled-in lines right here. That's what we've done. So how are we doing? I don't know, about the same as we've been doing. Now, there are a few breakout institutions. You're sitting in a nest of one of them right here, this one. But nonetheless, not much different. And then I just want you to see that college going rate right there. That's actually down. Why is it down? Because we're debating whether or not it's worth it. And kids are making choices based on that debate. That's actually an artifact of the debate. So current trajectories without innovation, again, not a good trend line. And then what about Arizona? Speculation? What? Good? Bad? Well, I mean, generally, I think Arizona is, let me be clear, has the right momentum, right trajectory, wants to do the right thing, has many pockets of innovation going on, new kinds of schools, new kinds of innovations, new kinds of charter schools, new kinds of universities like ASU, new kinds of ways to make things happen. But we're a big, tumultuous, highly diverse place. So it's complicated. Our new governor said this at his inauguration. It's fantastic. Just read it. We want to be competitive. Why do we want to be competitive? Because we want to have happy families. Because we want to be a great place to live. Competitiveness and life outcomes, economic competitiveness and life outcomes are highly correlated at the state level. That, by the way, is where we are as a percentage of all youths enrolling in post-secondary education. That would be a bad place to be. So why are we there? Well, we're down there. We got Arkansas, Oregon, the District of Columbia, and Nevada below us. And then back there at that, I know everybody thinks Massachusetts is just filled with communists, but they weren't always filled with communists. And even if they are communists, they're highly educated. Look at that. But in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, from the founding documents of their movement from under the rule of the King of England to an independent democratic place, with the constitutional instructions that I saw and articulated for you, looks to me like they took them seriously. Oh, by the way, how's Massachusetts doing from time to time economically? It does well from time to time. So we're falling a little bit further behind in this. So that's actually a backward number for us at the moment. But here's a number, this is a hard chart to read. I'm going to walk you through it because nobody believes it. And we worked a long time on this chart. So this is per capita gross domestic product. That is state, think of the state as a country. Think of these states on the right as countries, little countries. So Arizona's about, if it was a country, we'd be about the 35th largest economy on the planet if we were a country. So I only pick states that people like to talk about around here. So I picked states that are considered friendly, not run by wackos. I almost took Oregon off. And so here's what I want to show you. So this is per capita GDP in a given state relative to the national average. All right? So up here at the top, that green boy right there, that is the state of Washington. I don't know if you noticed this cluster of these three states. That would be Washington, and for a while, Nevada, no longer the case, and Colorado, now added by Oregon. So now you have Colorado, Washington, and Oregon are above the national per capita GDP. Colorado, Washington, and Oregon in the Pac-12 and Pac-12 wannabe states minus California. I never put California on charts because people start throwing up and all kinds of other things. So. And then that little puppy right there, that would be Arizona. Arizona started in the mid-80s as a per capita GDP relative to the U.S. average, got all the way up to 90% and has been hammered beyond belief since the recession. We're now at 80%. And Washington up here is at above 110%. And Utah, which started where we did, they've been moving up there approaching 100%. And that little place right there, that would be New Mexico. So in rank order, those three states in the western United States have the highest level of educational attainment. In rank order, those two have the lowest. Now again, I'm not making the data up or I didn't build the model. All I'm saying is that those two states, which can't even get to the national average of per capita GDP, have the lowest level of educational attainment, and those three states, which passed through the recession in a certain way, those slopes are kind of that one there, that Oregon one, I don't know what's doing there. I know they did legalize marijuana, but I don't think it's been that long ago. In fact, it turns out those Colorado, so somebody tell me what's going on. So Colorado, by the way, these percentages of differences, so by the way, if that line, that red line was there, the wealth to the state and the individuals would be a quarter higher, 25% higher. That's the difference, 25% higher. Who's been to the Front Range of Colorado recently? A few people? Yeah. I think there's one or two things going on there. But just look at this. Per capita GDP relative to U.S. average. So let's just take a look. Now, this is a better chart. Now, we built this chart. We built all these charts just for you. And this one we were arguing over last night when I was coming back from San Francisco on the plane. Luckily, they have ways for me to send out messages, and then we had all kinds of things. So this is kind of funny. Again, I'm a professor too, so just put up with this. Percent increase in per capita GDP between those 10 years, 2000 and 2010. How much did per capita GDP go up in a given place versus the change in 25 years or older having attained a bachelor's degree in the same time frame? The change. How many more did you produce? So let's see. North Dakota, I'm not sure what that is, but North Dakota is, just take that off because of fracking. And there's fewer people living in North Dakota than live in central Phoenix. But nonetheless, so there's Arizona, by the way. Oh, the most important thing, by the way, on this chart is the white line. There is a correlation between expanding the number of college graduates and expanding wealth. So when people say there's no correlation, contraire. There is a correlation. There's Utah, that bastion of liberalism right there. That bastion of liberalism right there in Utah, they are unbelievably moving forward right now. They increased their numbers of degrees by 12%. They increased their per capita GDP since 2000, between 2000 and 2010, by almost 10%. We had a decrease. We had a decrease in per capita income. And just process that. Something weird going on. And I'll tell you the one thing that we did is, oh, by the way, we had the second lowest increase in college graduates. Because, as I showed you earlier, people aren't going to college. People aren't going to community college. They're going to community college, they're not graduating. The President last night, President of the United States, spoke about making community college free. Well, that's actually admirable if you don't have any money, but it's not the problem. The problem is completion. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So we did this again. So we took per capita GDP again, a kind of interesting number, and we pretended that Arizona was a country, and we plotted a proxy for this math, reading, and science score that's used around the world. It's not used in Arizona, but we found something analogous to it. So we plotted against that. There's the United States. There's the tiny little country of Singapore, which is economy is the similar size to Arizona. So that's the performance of that economy. That's their per capita income. That's their score on these kinds of tests. That's Arizona's score, right there. Now we're up above the curve, which is good, but we're on the left side of the curve, which is bad. So this tells you that we're not doing very well in that space, and we're hurt because of it, because it turns out, look at that scatter plot. It turns out these things actually make a difference, and I swear to you, I cannot get people to believe this. They don't believe any of this. Some of you don't believe it. New economy requires a new kind of university. We showed you the charter video, a complete re-engineering of a public research university in Arizona to address that. Can't take the same old model. It didn't work. Got to go at it again, reconfigure. And you can't, this is, by the way, a game you can't punt in. There's no punting. I told Coach Graham that we were going to put in his contract, he's not allowed to punt. It would make the game much more interesting, I'm just telling you. And so we think that Arizona needs, merits, and deserves a better kind of public research university, one that is inclusive rather than exclusive, admits talent from all segments of our society, as we said in the video, values the public outcome, the public value of our research, and takes responsibility for the outcome of our society, which means we're going to change the university. We're going to have different goals. We're going to demonstrate leadership in academic accessibility and excellence. We're going to establish national standing and academic quality in our colleges and our schools. We're going to establish ASU as a global center for interdisciplinary research, doing things that nobody else does, gaining recognition, working, finding ways to advance the economy in new ways. Local impact and social embeddedness, embedded in the community. You've seen these things. And how do we do that? And this is a new slide. It's no longer you're going to be an English major, you're going to be an art major, you're going to be a drama major, you're going to be a physics major, you're going to be a business major, you're going to do all that stuff. That's all interesting. It's not as important as what's in the middle. Critical thinking, how do you teach that so that we can solve any problem? And then look around the saw blade there. Integration and application, test and revise, inform and inscribe, discover and explore, negotiate and cooperate. If you can develop those skills, you can learn anything. Those are very difficult skills to teach. They're a lot different than just teaching software programming. That's easier to teach. And so we're trying to construct an institution where any child can come from any family background and can be engaged in what we're doing and can have that as their outcome. And the model that we're using is this one. The general education on the left, the green, the basic things that you need to know, think of it as Math 101, English 101, Psych 101, Econ 101, Civics 101, all those kinds of things that everybody needs to know, your breadth of knowledge. We're doing everything that we can to make that curriculum as technologically enabled as possible, which then will free the college student to then focus on the courses in their major, deep study, deep focus, multiple majors, multiple ways of doing things. You throw in a few electives. We think everybody should be taking art classes. Everybody, not just the art majors. Everybody should be taking writing classes, not just the English majors. We should be writing across the entire curriculum. And in the middle, the single most important thing, critical thinking. Can you solve the problem? Can you solve the equation? Can you change the community? Can you redesign the school? Can you build a better factory? Can you engineer a better hospital? Can you make the hospital more safe? That's the master learner. That's the college of today. It's, by the way, not just coming to the college for immersion. You might do that. You might not do that. You still have to do this. You have to be enhanced to do this across your life. How are we doing, by the way? We joined Purdue University and we did a poll, a national poll of college graduates to see how we were doing. We're doing pretty well, by the way. You can see that's against other national public universities, large public universities, private universities. So when, we are punching way above our weight here at ASU. Making things happen and producing great graduates. So, is there a value to earning a college degree to the individual? Any yeses? Is there value to the economy or to society? I want to hear the no's. Oh, do we need to produce more master learners? I guessed it. So why do they ask that? They ask it for lots of reasons. They ask it for lots of reasons. College has gotten so stuck up in some ways, colleges have. So stuck up and so disconnected from our society that a lot of people are disenfranchised. What is college? When you start charging $60,000 for what's called the term bill, your tuition and your room and board to go to a private college, I'd say there's one or two families that can't afford that. That's per year, by the way. There's some families that can, but most can't. So why do they still ask it? That's what we do. Everybody know what that is? So, why? Because we're at a moment where we're kind of lost. We don't understand exactly how we got to where we are, where we have the rise of these competitors, where now not everybody, but half the kids are supposed to go to community college or some kind of college, and we need to graduate everybody and need to get everybody through high school because it never used to work that way. And that's the way that it works now. And so I assume that you all would like us to try to figure out how to do the following. So here's something we just formed a big alliance that I happen to be the chairman of 11 major public research universities. Ohio State joined, Purdue joined, Mitch Daniels from Purdue, former governor of Indiana, University of Texas at Austin, University of Kansas, University of Central Florida, which is this behemoth school in Orlando, Georgia State, which graduates more African American students than any college in the country, University of California at Riverside, Iowa State, Oregon State, maybe one other that I forgot. All those schools have agreed to do four things. Find ways to produce more graduates. Find ways to produce more graduates from lower socioeconomic standing, in particular. Find ways to produce graduates at a lower cost. And find ways to innovate together. It's called the University Innovation Alliance. But why do people ask if college is still worth it? To what extent has college become a place where there's some belief that there's some bias in the system? How many of you think that there's some that believe there's bias in the system? Some of you believe that? So 80% of the children from families in the upper quarter of family incomes will earn a college degree, 80%. Less than 10%, around 9% from the bottom quarter of family incomes, regardless of their academic ability. With lots of exceptions, they parade the exceptions out on the front page of the New York Times, all 8 of them. And so, it's not is college worth it, is continuing to find ways to advance education in new models worth it. So we're going to stop there, and then Rick's going to ask me some questions, and you guys are going to ask some questions we've got. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I should call you Professor Crow.
Yes.
Remember, if you have some questions,
Rick
pass
and
them.
I used to go out late at night in graduate school and eat French fries together. So
Yeah.
he called me many
I
things.
think they can tell that.
As you can see, they've stuck with us.
If you have questions, pass them to the end of the row, and I'm going to be working through them here. So let me start with one that I have 4 or 5 very similar questions on. So what is your reaction to Governor Ducey's proposed $75 million cut in higher education spending?
You know, the governor has a very difficult dilemma. So he's right out of the starting blocks. He's faced with a financial shortfall in the design system that he's inherited. He can't change that design system quickly, so he's got to bring the budget into balance right away. So I think it's understood that he needs to do that. It's unfortunate that means cuts for higher education, because it turns out that then lowers our ability to do this. I think what my hope is that, and I'm confident that this is the case, that the governor will very shortly move towards explaining his strategy as opposed to his tactic. So cuts are a tactic, they're not a strategy. There's no strategy to cutting. There's nothing involved with cutting, you just cut. And so I think the governor will move forward with a strategy. We've been interacting with the governor and his staff, and I think the strategy will be evolving around how do we enhance the economic competitiveness of Arizona through education. Now, obviously, no one likes to take the kinds of cuts that are being talked about. Very few states are making cuts right now. Arizona happens to be in a position for the reasons that we've articulated. I mean, it's the reality of realities. You have to do something. And so at the same time, I'm hopeful that in relatively short order, we will be moving towards a strategy that includes action plans and so forth to move higher education to higher levels of production.
You know, it's been a busy week for higher ed. You also mentioned President Obama's State of the Union comments and other announcements he made earlier in the week about community college being free. You mentioned that briefly in your talk. You mentioned some concerns about it. What were you concerned about?
So the idea, I mean, I certainly would hate for there to be a situation where a person fully capable of going to community colleges in a family circumstance where they have no money, which is many people, don't have access to some means to go to the community college. And so that's different than declaring something free.
Yeah.
If something is, it's not free, but you get help to go. It's like a different logic. And so the notion of free, I don't think is necessarily the best nomenclature. I think the best nomenclature is accessible. But I think more important than cost is performance. And so right now we do not have the kind of performance that we need nationally out of our community colleges. This is something that we've worked on very significantly here at ASU. And we've seen a huge improvement in transfer from the community colleges to the university, and ultimately students graduating. I think this year we will graduate right at 7,000 students from ASU with degrees that started in community colleges, and that's huge. I mean, that's really significant. And so the thing that we need to do, and I've said this to folks, is that we spend a lot of time focusing on the individual and attempting to empower the individual with resources, when in fact we need to empower the individual and the institutions for the individual to be successful. And we do less of that and need to do more of that.
You know, as we talk about college costs and whether it's free and accessible and those kinds of things, there's certainly a sentiment, a question here, a couple questions on sort of is there going to be a burst in that bubble of those costs? So if you had shown a chart there of college costs, obviously they have been increasing over time. And this person speculates, is there going to be something like we had the housing bubble that burst? Is there going to be at some point in time some kind of burst that occurs that causes some large, change in the system?
Yeah, no, I don't think that's the problem. So the turns out that the federal government's funding of student loans is a profit center for the federal government.
Yeah.
So they don't actually lose money on that. So that's not going to burst. What we've got is a situation where again, we're giving financial aid to the student. The student may not even spend it on their college education. They may spend it on a car or a house or something else. That's still allowed, and that's not something that's very good. We would prefer that kind of financial aid be granted to the institution to cover the student's expenses for attending the institution. But having said that, I think that where we are for Arizona students is we agreed 4 years ago, or 3.5 years ago, we put forth a new, what we call a strategic enterprise framework. Think of it like a business plan for the university, and in that plan, we said that we would not increase tuition for 10 years by any more than 3% in any given year, period. Last year for in-state students, undergraduates, we didn't increase tuition. Okay. The year that we're in, regardless of what the state does, we will not increase tuition for an in-state graduate or undergraduate student. So in the 4-year cycle, we will have increased tuition in that 4-year period by less than 1%. And so, and so we're not asking for an in-state tuition increase this year. We may not next year, and we didn't last year for undergraduates. And so our cost for tuition for Arizona students after grants, not loans, after grants, is under $4,000. Our cost to a student from a family from $45,000, that's the Pell Grant level, and below is under $400.
Yeah.
And so we have thousands and thousands and thousands of those students. So we have re-engineered the financial structure of the institution. We've re-engineered the design of the institution. We've re-engineered the pedagogical structure, the injection of technology, the way that we operate. I was looking at some data today. So Ohio State University has right at 50 employees per 100 students. Yeah. Well, we have 12.
Yeah.
So we operate on a different structure, on a different basis.
Yeah, can you say a little bit more about this? There's another question here. What is ASU doing to manage costs and reverse the growth of administrative headcount? So
I think that last point, whoever asked that, they ought to
Yeah.
just ask me for that chart, because we compare ourselves against everyone. It turns out we have the lowest administrative headcount. What we have is a lot of people that are out there that make the error of thinking that if a person's not on the faculty, they're an administrator. They might be a scientist, they might be a librarian, they might be an advisor, they could be this, they could be that. Well, forget all that. We have just under 12 employees per 100 students. The average of our peers is 25. The average of our peers is 25. Some schools have 50, some have 90. And so we have 12. So that just sort of answers that question by itself.
yeah. So as we talk about what the state's doing, as we talk about what you're doing at ASU in terms of reducing costs, it almost gets to a point, and the question here is, if the state continues to cut funding for the public higher ed, is there a point in which you could see the public institutions going private or some form of going private, that they would get to a point where there's not even what we would consider to be traditional public institutions?
The privatization of public universities sort of takes that notion of the role of education and democracy and sort of smashes it to some extent. And so our function is different. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to have the same model or the same investment strategy. And so I think what we're going to be looking to do with Governor Ducey and the new administration and the new leadership in the legislature, who invest less than 15% of our operating budget is from that investment source. We're gonna try to figure out how do we take state investments and target them and focus them in a way where they help us to achieve the greatest outcomes. And so we think that's built around performance-oriented investment models. We think that's built around models that are sometimes associated with investments in capital infrastructure, that kind of thing. And then we limit the investments to that, and we hold people accountable for their performance. And so I think that in education, you can hold people accountable for their performance, and you can fund them based on their performance, and it actually works out to be very successful.
So, and a related question on sort of the other end of the spectrum is, as there's a concern about public universities going private, there's also a broader concern about there just being a reduction in the number of universities overall. In fact, this person writes that Sebastian Thrun, CEO of Udacity, has quoted as saying, in 50 years, there will only be 10 institutions in the world delivering higher education. What is your reaction to that prediction? If this is true, why should taxpayers continue to pay for an institution that may not even exist in 50 years?
So Sebastian's a really smart guy, and I know him. A couple of you also in the room know him. He's a very smart guy. He was one of the youngest people ever elected to the National Academy of Engineering from his professorship at Stanford. He won the Defense Department's smart car, robot-driven car. He started Udacity, which was a Google X spin-out on MOOCs and other kinds of online education and so forth. And so the notion that somehow on a planet of, by then, 9 or 10 billion people, there'll be 10 colleges attempting to educate everyone, and the faculty will be reduced to like the people in this room, 400 people. I just find that unlikely. And so that doesn't mean, though, however, that there won't be dramatic changes. So we're producing twice as many graduates and doing 4 times as much research with a faculty roughly the same size from 10 years ago. So we've doubled the number of graduates, enhanced the quality of the graduates, increased our research by a factor of 4, and our faculty is the same size. Now, if you got everybody operating at those levels of efficiency and those levels of outcomes, then you could have a model where the cost basis actually goes down, right, and access actually goes up. And so that's what we're trying to demonstrate.
This person coming in from the internet said, basically, will you try to, again, to improve, increase investment in student-led businesses, because if you do that, it will support growth of local startups and grow value for the university, thereby improving the value overall of the university. So, talk a little bit about.
So what we're focusing on there is we're focusing on trying to get entrepreneurial energy, entrepreneurial activity in all schools, from the humanities to the art and music school, to the nursing school, to the journalism school, where entrepreneurism is not just thought about in the business school or the engineering school, where people are, and entrepreneurism is not just about business formation, it's about idea, the forward movement of ideas. How do you move an idea from your head to reality? How do you move an idea from your head to a reality, to a social enterprise, to a business enterprise, to a community development enterprise, to an educational enterprise, to a movie, to a musical concert, to a neighborhood group, whatever it happens to be? How do you make things happen? And so that kind of entrepreneurial energy, we are putting more emphasis in that. We are advancing that as a core objective of the institution.
As we think about Arizona specifically, this person writes, what opportunity for Arizona attainment growth resides in Arizona's growing Latino population? What is the key to raising attainment for Arizona's Latinos?
So the state is already unbelievably diverse. It will only be more diverse in the future. That diversity is an opportunity for economic growth and economic activity, and the expression of ranges of economic models and cultural this and communities and vibrant communities and so forth. And the key is going to be back to this last model of the last 100 years. It's educational attainment. So educational attainment for people of Hispanic origin in Arizona is lagging behind where it needs to be for the economy to be successful. When that educational attainment level is achieved, everything will kick in and then some, because you'll have the advantage of cultural diversity, which leads to economic diversity, which leads to economic outcomes, but you've got to get everybody up to a level of educational attainment where they have as much adaptability and flexibility as possible. It turns out that that's an area that needs a lot of focus because we're playing a little bit of catch-up baseball. So we're a couple runs behind and we need to get ahead.
Yeah. I think this person resonated with you talking about your family and your roots. And the question is here, tell us what you thought about the value of college when you were finishing high school. When you were in high school, what was your sense about the value of college?
So I went to 4 high schools and 13 middle schools and elementary schools. And what I knew from I grew up in working class communities of enlisted personnel of the Navy. So we always lived like on the base in married enlisted men's quarters, or off the base with, in some kind of neighborhood that enlisted folks could afford, which were interesting neighborhoods, I got to tell you. And so what I realized when I was in high school was that my dad had been limited, as smart as he was, by the fact that he had only gone to high school and then been trained for his job in the Navy. And I realized when he got out of the Navy, he had a lot of difficulty getting out of the Navy. He didn't have very many options. And so he was going to return to his hometown and maybe do some kind of restaurant thing with a friend of his and this and some other stuff like that. And he just didn't have the options. And I remember saying to myself, man, I wouldn't want to be limited by that. I want to get out there and continue to learn. And so I was not a geeky kid. I was really a kind of a weirdo combination of geek shot putter. And so I spent a lot of time in the library. And when I was in the library, I would read these biographies of people over and over and over and over. And I'd look at these books filled with what people had done. And I'd look at what they did. And I kept seeing that they went to Case Western Reserve College, or they went to the Carnegie Institute of Technology, or they did this and this. And I was like, I didn't even know what those places were. But I knew that there was some correlation between them being in that book and them having gone to that school. And so I started thinking about going to college, and I tried to. My dad didn't have any money, and so there was a foundation, by the way, in Skokie, Illinois, or Cicero, Illinois, called the Espere Peterson Foundation, and we lived in Illinois near that about that time. And I never met these people, never saw them. They just showed up one day and said, "Here's $1,500 per year for 5 years to go to college. Good luck. Use it for whatever you want." It was unbelievable, and so and different things like that. And I don't even know how or why folks did that, but I knew that I wanted to find some way to continue my education, because I could just sense that it wasn't enough what I'd had so far.
So one last question, and I think a lot of people are thinking this. I've lived in Arizona all my life, and I've seen ASU grow from this small school nobody has ever heard of to this immense institution that it is today. When will ASU stop growing? With so many other universities across the country, does the nation really have a need for a 100,000 student plus university?
Well, there's lots of 100,000 plus student universities, by the way. So the City University of New York is 450,000 students, and the California State University is about that many. The University of California is 250,000. The University of Texas is 176,000. They have campuses that they operate with very expensive administrations on each of those campuses. So we have campuses that we operate with no administrations. And so we look like a single institution, and they look like a system. And those institutions are all, in one way or another, continuing to grow. So I think there's this notion, perhaps embedded in that question, that large is perhaps you reach some point of diminishing returns. Right. And so we have not reached a point of diminishing returns right now. All of our numbers, whatever they happen to be, freshman retention, quality of our graduates, awards to our graduates, graduation rates, learning outcomes, measured learning outcomes are continuing to rise. When it gets to the point where we have diminishing returns and the model is no longer an effective means or a cost-effective means or an educationally effective means, then we'll say, listen, this model's gone as far as it can go. Now, having said that, there are technological tools that we have access to right now. We have 1,500 Starbucks employees in our relationship with Starbucks. Starbucks has, in the US, about 130 or 140,000 employees. About 70,000 of them went to college and never finished. And most of them are disappointed that they never finished. They'd like to finish. We worked with Howard Schultz, who I saw yesterday in Sausalito, California, on another project that we're working on. And Howard Schultz, the chairman of Starbucks, said, let's find a way where we can take students through your ability to project high-quality degrees. We have 70 online degrees that are, of our 400 plus degrees, 70 are projected online. Let's find a way where we can eliminate the financial barrier to the employee of the partner at Starbucks. Let's get them on a track to finish their degree. No commitment back to the company. We work on improving human capital. No debt and no cost to the student if they finish. No debt and no cost to the student if they finish. They have to finish, or else they have to incur the debt. And so we've got 1,500 students in there. Now, at some point, we may have 4,000 Starbucks students in there per class. We may be graduating thousands per year. We'll be adding and contributing to the economy by doing that. We'll be proving that a corporation can advance shareholder value, can advance corporate success and community success, and work to educate its employees through a partnership with someone like us. And so I don't know how you scale that, but things are changing. So how many of you read, you might not have read the Gates Foundation just funded a whole series of new ways of teaching. Anybody been tracking that? millions of dollars per course. Don't think of it as a course, think of it like an entire curriculum. So we're involved in 3 or 4 of these, and one of them we're the principal partner in, and that's the science course. It's a science course where you're going to teach science through exploration, but you're going to explore through your machines. You're going to learn the equivalent of high school to freshman in college, math, chemistry, and physics. Or no, chemistry, physics, and biology, not math. Chemistry, physics, and biology through an exploration methodology. We don't know if this will work yet, but we're confident that it's going to give us a learning experience where we believe that it will have a high impact. And so if we can find new ways to teach, then scale is less important. It even frees up other resources that we have to focus on what we call full immersion learning, which there is a scale limit to that. Yep. So can technology and other methodologies help us to now scale the enterprise on a continuous basis? So far.
I think we should all thank President Crow for being here tonight.
Any questions? We can send them the presentation.
So if you gave us your email, if you had a question and gave us your email address, or if you're on the web, and by the way, as you probably know, we're streaming out on the web, so thank you to our web audience also. We will get back to you with an answer. Also, if you're interested in a copy of the presentation you saw here tonight, again, just leave us an email address and we'll make sure we share that with you. But most importantly, thank you for coming tonight and being part of this conversation.